Hello, my name is Maddie and it's September 1st today, like when I'm filming it right now. And I can't believe that it's already September because it feels like August just like flew by. I had to say goodbye to so many of my close friends, which was really hard because they're leaving for college, but they're doing great. They're all thriving and I'm kind of jealous, but it's fine. I'll get there soon enough. But we're not here to talk about me or my sadness or my friends. We're here to talk about all the books that I read in the month of August, which, final count, 16 books, which is crazy because, like, I never expected to read this many books in this month, but it just so happens that I did. And don't get used to this because it's probably not going to happen next month, although you never know. So without further ado, let's just get started. I'm going to go in the order that I read them, so from the beginning of the month to the end. So the first book I read in August was Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling. Obviously, I've already read this book. I hadn't reread these books since like summer of 2016 or something like that, because I was going to reread them after my little sister read them, but she took a really long time and then I got caught up in a whole bunch of other books, and before I knew it, it had been 3 years and I was starting to lose at my family's Harry Potter trivia game, which is not how I like things to go. So I was like, it's time for a reread. And it was such a beautiful experience rereading these books that I don't know what to say. Like, I can't conjure up a lot of thoughts because it was a while ago. I read it really fast like I normally do because I've read this book so many times. But it was such a beautiful experience coming back to Hogwarts. This entire book I was smiling. Basically this entire book I was like, I was so happy to just be back in this beautiful world that I love so much. It was amazing. I loved it. So instead of doing thoughts for like every single Harry Potter book, because they're all going to be the same and they're really hard to talk about individually, especially since it's been so long since I've read them, I'm just going to hold them up and talk about them. So the second book I read was Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. This is like one of my least favorite books in the series, just because I don't particularly enjoy the Chamber of Secrets, you know, or the Basilisk or anything. It's obviously still good and obviously, like, I still love Harry Potter. How could you not? But it was like, you know, I mean, I guess some of you don't because you love this book, but like, it's not my favorite. It's good, but it's not my favorite. And next, I read my favorite Harry Potter book, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. And I don't know why this is my favorite. I think it might have to do with the amount of school that's in it, because I do love Hogwarts, and it's amazing to get to like read about Hogwarts. And I also love Hermione, and so like the focus that Hermione gets in this book is amazing. I love time travel in like anything, so the time travel aspect in this book is amazing. I love it so much. And if you're watching this video and have never read any of these books, well, these 7, I don't know what you're doing with your life. Sorry, I don't make the rules. Next, I obviously read Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. I really enjoy this book. Enjoy. I will continue to enjoy it. I will continue to enjoy all of them because I love the Triwizard Tournament aspect of this book. I love the idea of a magical competition. I love how in the first book it's like all we think about is Hogwarts, and then in this book we're like, right, the rest of the world is out there. So like the Quidditch World Cup, but also seeing Durmstrang and Beauxbaton, and I really enjoy that in this book. And I like how it starts to get sort of serious in this book, because the first 3 books, they're beautiful. I think it's amazing how it's done because they're very childish, or, well, not very childish, but they're written more for children, obviously, because Harry's 11, 12, and 13, and here he's 14, he's starting to have to grow into himself, he has acquired a lot of responsibility, so there's all of these amazing, like, J.K. Rowling is phenomenal. And I love this book. But there's all of these amazing points that we never thought about before that finally happened, and it's just really exciting. Next, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Besides Chamber of Secrets, this is probably one of my least favorite books because it's so long. It took me forever to read it the first time, and the entire time I was like, when will this book be over? And it just kept happening and happening, and Umbridge is annoying, and Harry is so angsty, and so it's like, you just want to strangle something. And like, I don't want to say that the end is worth it because like the end is absolutely devastating, but the rest of the series makes reading this book absolutely worth it, and getting to the end of this series makes reading this book absolutely worth it. Next is, if you haven't already guessed, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed this book because sometimes I wonder, I don't enjoy the movie very much. I think I like the 5th one and I like the 7th one, but I don't like the 6th one as much. Sometimes wonder if that inhibits my liking of the book because I see the movies a lot more than I read the books because it takes so much longer to read the books. But I mean, it's worth it, obviously. Sometimes then the books and the movies get a little bit disjointed in my head and I forget they're separate entities and should be treated as such sometimes. So rereading this book surprised me. I was more into this book than I was in the past. And it's amazing because I talked about how it's crazy how angsty he gets in the Order of the Phoenix. Like, we all know, he gets crazy. Obviously, all of his struggles are legitimate, I guess. All of his struggles are completely heard, but also, like, sometimes I can't quite mesh with them. Like, I understand he's struggling, he's mad, and he feels like the world doesn't understand him. And boy, do I get that as an adolescent. But it doesn't always match up, I guess. Anyway. In the 7th book, though, he becomes, like, a bigger person, I guess. He has to make more mature decisions and all of that stuff. So, reading this book and seeing his angst from the 5th book sort of have to die down as he has to come into this, like, new position, but also seeing that that angst is still there because obviously he's only 16, he only knows so much, right? So seeing him still, like, have crushes, still freak out about social situations, but, like, also have to learn how to have responsibility, I guess. It's such an amazing look into basically every teenager's experience. And it's amazing to see where he came from in the 1st book to where he, like, what he becomes in the 7th book. And it's amazing to think about all of the books as sort of each one a stepping stone for him. And this one is maybe one of the most important ones because he sort of has to put on this aura of responsibility past the angsty, no one understands me. And that's something not a lot of people can do until they're in their 20s. So seeing him do it at 16 is amazing. And finally, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. The first time I read this book, I cried. It was one of the first times I'd cried reading a book because in the past, I didn't get super attached to the characters, but in this one, the series just, like, it hit me in a really personal place, as I think it does to most people, if not everyone. So seeing all of the heartache that the people go through in this book is, like, oh. And this book has, like, it's so many emotions. You'd think that after 6 years, I read this series 6 years ago, you'd think that after 6 years I wouldn't have so many emotions about this book, but I have so many emotions about this book. I do weird stuff when I read. You don't want to know. It's weird, you can ask some of my friends, but reading this book just brought all of that out of me, but also, I can't talk about this book. Not like I can't talk about it because of spoilers. I just can't deal with this book. It kills me every single time. And I love it. Of course I love it. But, like, kills me. And it's so frustrating and exciting and hopeful and happy and fearful and, like, there's just so many emotions and I can't. Okay. It's fine. We're fine. Hold on a second. You're gonna be out here. We're going to stack you in order because not in order is a struggle. So, obviously now we're done with all of the Harry Potter. So next, I read American Royals by Katharine McGee. And I've talked about this book a little bit, but for those of you who don't know, American Royals is basically if the Washingtons back in the late 1700s had decided to make the US a monarchy instead of a democracy. And while I think that's an amazing concept, I don't personally think that this book did it justice. Because this book is, while it sounds like, here, I'll read you the, like, elevator pitch thing that's on the back. The power, the drama, the intrigue, the crown. What if America had a royal family? So you'd think that that would be about, like, politics and, like, the repercussions of having a monarchy in the US and how that changes sort of the course of the world, but instead it's just like a romance about royals, but instead of in a different country, it's in the US. And while it was good in the romance department, like it was funny, you know, obviously I liked the characters and stuff, it was kind of honestly annoying reading this book and not seeing any sort of representation of how this made the US different. The only difference I can see is that these guys are still on the throne. But like really, they don't do much else besides like what the president does. And we didn't get to see a lot of like how the government runs, any of these things, because it was just about teenagers being teenagers. And while that's a perfectly acceptable thing, it was just not what I was looking for when I read this book. So I didn't really love it. It was fine. It did all it came for, I guess, but like I didn't really love it. Next up, I started this series back in like March, I want to say, and I had the next book, but I didn't feel like reading it. And I finally finished the series. It was so worth it. Oh my gosh. It's Legendary and Finale by Stephanie Garber. I'm going to talk about Legendary a little bit first and then Finale. So, if you don't know, okay, wait. This is the first book in the series, Caraval. Caraval is about a Caraval. It's like a carnival, but it's magical and mystical and all this stuff. And the main character, Scarlet, had been writing letters to the master of this carnival named Legend, basically because she wanted to get to go to the carnival since she was very young, and she stopped when she was a little bit older. But finally, when she's about 17 or something like that, she gets an invitation to enter Caraval, and the same day that her sister goes missing. So she thinks that these two events are connected. So she pairs up with someone named Julian, who helps her escape her sort of like abusive father and take her to Caraval, where she gets to play the game and win the prize of one wish. It's like this highly coveted thing. So she's really surprised to get in there, and then when she gets in there, it's like, is everything really what it seems? Because Legend is like this master of illusions, I guess. He fabricates things, basically, and you sort of have to figure out what is real and what is not. And I really, really loved this book. I loved Scarlet's point of view. I loved all of the magical aspects. I loved where it went. It was beautiful. But we're not talking about Caraval, we're talking about Legendary. And while Legendary was a really good book, I didn't enjoy it as much as Caraval. I'm not sure, but I think it's because the last book was about the older sister, Scarlet, and this book centers the younger sister, Donatella. And I would try to describe this book and Finale to you, but that's spoilers, so we're not going to describe them. I'm just going to talk about how I feel about them. Because I love Scarlet's point of view because I connected with her a lot, and I don't connect as much with Donatella because Scarlet is very cautious. She doesn't do things without thinking them out like at least three times, making sure that nothing will go wrong, and Donatella throws herself into everything and doesn't think about the consequences. And while I think that can be a really interesting personality trait to read about, I didn't connect with her as much. I don't know if that's because of it, in spite of it. Donatella wasn't my favorite narrator, and that does not diminish from the beautiful story that is written in this, that is written in Finale, but it was hard for me in that aspect because I just kept not really understanding where she was coming from. So then obviously after I read Legendary, I had to pick up Finale by Stephanie Garber, similar to Legendary. So this book is dual point of view. So the first book was Scarlet's point of view, the second book was Donatella's point of view, and this book is split point of view. So we see both points of view. And of course I love this book and it was beautiful, but the split point of view really reminded me how much I love Scarlet and how much I don't love as much Donatella, because we got a lot more of Donatella's point of view in this book, and every time I was like, okay, that's great, where's Scarlet? I want to know what's going on with her life, and she's the only one I care about, she's not being angsty and annoying, all these things. So I loved it, and I was frustrated by her point of view because I never wanted to hear it. But it was good. It was a beautiful finale. Finale. After I finished Finale, I read my first graphic novel that I've read in a while, and that was The Prince and the Dressmaker by Jen Wang. And oh my goodness, I love it. This book is basically about obviously a prince and a dressmaker, and the dressmaker makes these like really outrageous dresses, and so next I read Isla and the Happily Ever After by Stephanie Perkins. And this is the third book in the Anna and the French Kiss trilogy, but you don't have to read them in order. It is gratifying to read them in order because you see the characters from the first book and the second book, and then on and on and on. But you can read them in whatever order you want to. Basically, this book is about Isla, who has had a crush on a classmate of hers, Josh, since they were freshmen, but Josh had been seriously dating someone until they were both juniors when Josh and his girlfriend broke up because his girlfriend was going to college. So Isla finally sort of sees her chance, but doesn't really know how to go about it, and they have an awkward meeting in New York where they live, and then they're going to the same school, SOAP, School of America Paris, and the shenanigans just sort of go from there. It was exactly what I expected it to be, which isn't a bad thing. That's a really good thing because I just wanted something lighthearted and funny and happy. It was the banter was beautiful. Just all of the moments were beautiful. They made me happy. This book also hit really hard because the main character reminded me a lot of a friend of mine who has very similar experiences to Isla. So that it was difficult to read in that way, but it was still amazing and I loved it so much. And I wish that this series would keep going and just Stephanie Perkins would just keep writing more and more and more because they're adorable and I read them so fast, but they just make me so happy. Next, I read City of Ghosts by Victoria Schwab. And I wasn't really expecting to read this book this month at all. I went on a trip, and so I could only pack a limited amount of books, so I just sort of grabbed random ones off my TBR and went with it. And this was one of them. So when I got to where we were staying, I was like, oh, I didn't mean to grab this. Whoops. But I read it, and I surprisingly really, really enjoyed it. It was just so, I've said this 3 times, it's so heartwarming. And I know I've said that for the past 2 books, but the relationship that the main character has with one of her friends is just so pure and just makes me happy. I never described what this book is about. Wow. Failing. This book is about a girl named Cassidy who goes through what she thinks of as a near-death experience, but as an actual death experience that she was somehow miraculously saved from. She can see ghosts and do what she calls pulling back the veil, which means she can sort of go into the ghost world and stuff. And she just sort of goes through and sees what happens to people, but never really interacts with the ghost besides her best friend Jacob, who is a ghost, until her parents start a ghost hunting-ish show. And the first episode is set in Edinburgh, so instead of going on her summer vacation like she thought, she is dragged off to Edinburgh, which is one of the oldest cities in England and therefore very, very full of ghosts. So she has to sort of deal with this chaotic world where everything around her is screaming at her to pull back the veil, to go through to the ghost world, and she really doesn't know why. She doesn't have anyone to educate her on why she's able to pull back the veil. This book was so cute. Like I said already, I haven't read a middle grade in a while. I've been reading a lot of YA and adult, and I forgot how heavy those can be sometimes, even when they're light and fluffy. It's these people have all of these responsibilities that are put on them, and it's important to read about those and to see them, but it's also good to see someone struggle with the lack of responsibility they're given, the lack of freedom, and it's so cute, and I can't wait. The next book is coming out in 2 days for me, probably already out for you guys. The next book is coming out in 2 days for me. I just pre-ordered it. I'm so excited for it to come out. Yeah, I can't wait to see the adventures that she continues to go on because they're so cute, and I think that although a lot of people will be like, oh, it's children's, I'm not gonna read it, it's worth it. Trust me. That was chaotic. Alright, next I read an oldie, but apparently, according to other people, I wouldn't know, a goodie, Vampire Academy by Rochelle Mead. I did not read this when it first came out. I had never planned to read it. Sort of like Twilight. I was like, I'm not really a vampire girl. Obviously, I'm not a vampire. They know what you mean, dummy. Okay, I'm not really that into like vampire novels, obviously. When this book came out in like 2007, I was 6 years old, so this wasn't really my cup of tea when I was 6. And because it's so old, I never really planned to read it, and then a lot of people have recommended it, surprisingly, because I didn't ever think that I would get to it. But here we are. I've read it. It was alright. I have most of the rest of the series, so I'm going to continue. I never explained what this book is about. Bad YouTuber. This book is about a girl named Rose who is basically sworn to protect this one vampire royal named Lisa, and for reasons we don't know in the beginning, Rose and her best friend slash protectee, the person she's protecting, they run away from an area that is believed to be safe. And then the beginning of this book basically starts, it's been 2 years and they're being dragged back to the academy where they should be learning how to, she's learning how to protect her friend, and her friend is learning how to be a royal. And it just sort of goes from there. And this book was very surface content, which I understand that it's like a surface level book because it's a first book in the series, so the only thing you can do is breach the surface. And right now you're trying to pull in fans, so that's going to be done with lots of like heartwarming, cutesy moments, a couple of scandalous parts. So I'm excited to read the rest of the series and see how the events in this book go deeper. For now it was okay. It wasn't like mind-blowing. It wasn't my new favorite book at all. But I am excited to continue with the series. So there's that. I promise we're almost done, guys. This is the last book that I finished. The second to last book that I've read. That I'm reading. That have read. The next book is Anna and the French Kiss by Stephanie Perkins. And on this trip I read Isla and the Happily Ever After. And after that, all I wanted to do was reread this book, because this is my favorite book of the trilogy. After having read all 3, this is my favorite book in the trilogy. And luckily there was a bookstore where we were going on this trip, and they had a copy of Anna and the French Kiss, so I bought it and I reread it in like 6 hours, not even, like 4 hours, and it was beautiful and I love it so much. And I still love it, and I'm so happy that I own a copy now because then I can just reread it whenever I want. For those of you who don't know, this book is about a girl named Anna whose father sends her to school in Paris, SOAP, School of America Paris. You can see where the books sort of intertwine. For her senior year of high school, and she sort of has to navigate there around students who've known each other for the past 4 years, and she doesn't speak any French, all of that stuff. So it's a cool finding yourself book because it's the sort of thing that happens to people in college where it's like you finally are living by yourself, you have to learn all of these things, but it happens to her in high school, and so she becomes very much more independent because of it. This remains my favorite book, like I said, my favorite book in the trilogy. I love it so much. I love Anna. I love her quirks. I love how she just lives with herself and doesn't care what anyone else thinks, even though sometimes she does, usually she doesn't. I related to her a lot, and I'm probably going to reread it again in the next year because I love it so much. I'm sorry if you can hear screaming children. I promise they're like across the street, but they're very loud. And I love this book. And that was all the books that I read in August. I'm currently reading The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I'm on page 52, so you can see I've made a lot of progress. It's just really intimidating. It's like 1,200 pages. And it's also hard because I have a friend who has read it, and this is actually his copy. He lent it to me because he really wants me to read it, but it's hard for me because, first of all, I feel like I need to like it because it's his, even though it's like kind of boring so far. I'm sorry. I'm sure it's gonna pick up, obviously. I don't know how it could not, but right now it's a little bit like, I don't really know what's going on, and I'm not really connected to any of the characters, and we're already on page 50, like, shouldn't I have some sort of connection with the characters by now? I have no idea how to describe this book. Once again, I forgot. I have no idea how to describe this book because I'm only 50 pages in. But it's pretty good so far. We'll see where it goes. And yeah, those were all the books I read in August. I'm not gonna do like a TBR for September. I have a couple of books that I'm planning on reading, but I am horrible at TBRs because I'm not like a super huge mood reader, but I'm mostly a mood reader. So like I will read books that like, usually it's just whatever I feel like. I have a couple of people I'm buddy reading books with, so that'll happen. But yeah, for now, we're not gonna have a TBR for September. Don't be too disappointed. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!